For the longest time, there has been one genre I've stayed far away from, and that's horror. I just couldn't do it. At least that's what I told myself. The only horror game I ever touched in my 25 years of life is Slender back in 2011, and even that felt like a mistake. Anytime I wanted to experience a horror game after that, I wasn't playing it. I was watching, Jev or Hollow play it, half looking at the screen and half looking away. Horror movies are the same story. I'll only watch a horror movie if I'm in a cinema with friends. If you lock me in a room by myself and tell me to watch a movie like The Exorcist, yeah, you can bet your life savings I'm not watching that. That's just where I've always stood with horror. But around, I'd say mid-2025 last year, something changed. I started realizing I'd probably be missing out on a whole side of gaming. And that brings me to a confession. I had never played a Resident Evil game before. Not one. It's not like I didn't know about it. Resident Evil has always existed in gaming culture. You hear the name constantly. You see new ones coming out every few years. I mean, Resident Evil Requiem releases soon as of me making this video. And when you skip a franchise like Resident Evil, especially early on, it starts to feel harder and harder to jump in later. The games keep stacking up and more remakes keep coming out. At some point you're thinking, where do I even begin? The first game? 7? 4? And yes, I now know that Resident Evil isn't just cheap jump scares and loud noises. There's actual great lore here, characters that people care about, a storyline that stretches across decades. But any game with sudden screams and, dark hallways that you have to slowly walk into, that kind of stuff has always messed with me. Now, before we go any further, I do have to say this. I haven't played every single game. The ones that you're seeing on the screen right now, those are the ones I have not touched yet. I do plan on getting to them eventually, but I just wanted to focus on the main games first and really understand the core story of Resident Evil before branching out. So if you're wondering why a few games are missing in this video, then you know why. They're coming, just not yet. Now fast forward to February 2026. I am now a huge Resident Evil fan. After playing through the games, well, almost all of them, I can safely say this franchise is within my top 5 gaming franchises of all time. So in this video, I want to walk you through that whole experience, going from somebody who had never even touched a Resident Evil game to now being way too invested. As in, I watched lore videos at like 4 AM trying to go to sleep. I went from avoiding this franchise completely to being a complete addict. Resident Evil has like the most confusing naming structure ever. No, I didn't start with the original 1996 Resident Evil. I technically played the HD remaster of the 2002 GameCube remake of that game. I think it's like a remake of a survival horror game about, zombies. And that was basically my introduction to this behemoth of a franchise. I wanted the full experience and I was willing to start right at the beginning. Now going into Resident Evil 1, I barely knew anything about this series. I knew the name Leon Kennedy and I knew that there was a super tall hot lady somewhere in this franchise, and that was it. So everything in this game felt new. At first I thought I wasn't going to enjoy the locked camera angle that this game presents itself with, but after a while of getting used to it, I liked it. It gave me a nostalgic feeling, which is quite strange to say, because before this game I'd never played a fixed camera angle horror game before. But I guess it's the atmosphere? Now first off, the mansion. This is the setting of Resident Evil 1, and this mansion hooked me. Now near the start, it feels like a maze full of locked doors and, weird puzzles, and then it slowly starts to make sense. It's got that Metroidvania style loop where, the actual exploration is the reward. For example, when I find a certain key or an item in this game, that right there felt like a moment of satisfaction because you then realize that you know where to use that item, and that was such a great feeling. By the end, I knew that mansion like the back of my hand. The atmosphere is unreal too. The lighting, the sound design, even when it frustrated me, it kept me always clenching my ass cheeks, simply because of that fixed camera angle and not knowing if there's something around the corner. The story I'd say surprised me the most. You're part of STARS, investigating murders near Raccoon City. You take shelter in that mansion that turns out to be a front for Umbrella's underground lab. Now, if you're watching this video and you have never played Resident Evil, but you are also one of my Assassin's Creed subscribers, think of Umbrella as the Abstergo equivalent of the Resident Evil franchise. A big shady corporation that's messing around with things they shouldn't, and people getting betrayed left and right. The whole Wesker reveal in this game, that to me was very well done. Now, of course, the game definitely does show its age. I mean, the inventory can feel a bit annoying to get used to, but this was a product of its time. And I can only imagine back then, like in 1990, when did this game come out? 96, 8? This type of stuff was just fantastic. So yeah, I went in thinking I could not handle horror. Now, at the point of when I finished Resident Evil 1, I'm looking at the rest of this franchise thinking, okay, what's next?
Resident Evil 0.
And what came next was a game that, I'll be honest, it almost made me drop the entire franchise right there on the second game. Now, Resident Evil 0 is a game that I don't despise, but let's just say it's a game that I will probably not be replaying anytime soon for the foreseeable future. Now, I just came off Resident Evil 1. Wait, that sounded crazy. I never came to Resident Evil 1, I finished Resident Evil 1. And I immediately jumped into RE0. This felt like a downgrade in, let's just say, pretty much everything. It still nails the survival horror aspect in terms of atmosphere and, you know, survival and that kind of thing. But there are so many issues with this game that I found it quite miserable trying to get through. I'll start with the good. I loved the train, especially the opening section. I thought the concept of a dual protagonist system was great. I mean, in later games it works well, but the way RE0 did it, it felt a bit stupid. The inventory system is a complete mess. The fact that there was no item boxes, despite the game having a limited inventory, made no sense at all. And that to me felt like a punishment for no reason at all. I thought the partner AI was clunky. Most of the time I would leave the other characters standing still just so they would not burn through my ammo. That kind of defeats the purpose of having a second protagonist, you know? Now, story-wise, it didn't really hook me. A few moments were interesting, but a lot of the enemies and story ideas just didn't work well in my head the way the first game did. I don't know if that's the public opinion on this game, but that's how it felt playing through it for me. And at the end of the day, this was my personal experience with this franchise, not anybody else's.
Resident Evil 2.
Now here's where I know people might get triggered, because whilst I am aware the original Resident Evil 2 and 3 are fantastic, I played the remakes of those games. Well, except for 4. I played the original and the remake of 4, but when it comes to 2 and 3, I opted for the remakes. Now I will say, after RE0 disappointed me, I knew I would not be disappointed with RE2, because there's a 19-year difference between both games. And I will let you know right now, out of every Resident Evil game I played in this behemoth of a franchise, this game right here, RE2 Remake, this is my number 1 in the entire series. This game is absolutely amazing. From the very beginning when, you know, we walk into that gas station as the newbie recruit Leon and you see all the blood on the floor, that's when I knew that this wasn't going to be like the older games. The RE engine, which is what these remakes are built on I believe, makes everything look way too real. The lighting is superb, the way the shadows move when you barely turn your flashlight, and you know, when you finally reach the Raccoon City Police Department, it's the perfect setting to have the game take place in. I'd even say it's a masterclass in level design. It actually used to be an art museum, which explains the weird gothic architecture and why you're using literal medallions and cranks to open doors in a police station. Atmosphere wise, I'd say it's up there with the best. It's got that Metroidvania style loop I loved in RE1, where you're constantly unlocking shortcuts and finding keys. But it feels so much more visceral with the modern over-the-shoulder camera. The game forces this constant run or shoot dilemma on you because ammo is so scarce. You know, I found myself having to decide which zombie was worth a bullet and which ones I just had to juke. But we have to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. X. I had heard the stories before I played this game, but nothing prepares you for the actual real thing when he shows up. He turns the RPD from this, you know, creepy puzzle box where the only real threat is, I'd say, zombies, and he turns it into a terrifying game of cat and mouse. You know, you hear those heavy thuds on the floorboards above you while you're trying to solve a puzzle. That's the most stressful thing I've ever experienced in this franchise. He's an invincible stalker that forces you to make split-second decisions, and he completely shatters any sense of safety that you thought you had. Now what's cool is, even though I didn't play the original game, I can tell that this was a love letter to that game. I've seen the public reception on this remake, and I mean, look at the Metacritic scores. Plus, it's got tons of replayability. I finished Leon's excellent story and immediately went back for Claire's second run, just to see the different perspectives and locations. I would say this game is the gold standard for how to do a remake. And to be honest, if you're looking to start the franchise, honestly, this is the one that I would tell you to start with first. After the absolute high of Resident Evil 2, I went straight into the Resident Evil 3 remake, and it's a complicated one. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind this game at all, which I know isn't the common sentiment around this remake. It's a lot more, let's just say, action movie feeling to it, and that makes it feel like a total rush. I thought Jill Valentine was fantastic, and Raccoon City looks better than ever, but I have to be honest, it was way too short of a game. I mean, you can literally finish it in one sitting if you really wanted to. Now, coming off the massive interconnected maze of the RPD, this felt way more linear. It's literally you going from point A to point B without anything in the middle. I've seen people online complaining about cut content like the clock tower and the park from the 1999 original, and even as a newcomer, I could tell that something was missing. In fact, I do plan to play the original game at some point. Now, the absolute highlight for me of this game though was Carlos. I loved his sections. The hospital segment in particular was so good. That part felt like proper horror. It actually brought back that, resource managing survival feeling I was craving. Carlos himself is such a great character too, and it bums me out that I don't think we've seen him again after this game, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know why. Is he just gone? I mean, give the man another game for God's sake. Even Nemesis, he felt a bit handled. After the constant unscripted terror of Mr. X stalking me in RE2, Nemesis felt a bit more like a series of scripted chase sequences. He's terrifying to look at, way more scarier than Mr. X in terms of pure physical presence. I mean, his speed is something else, but he just did not give me that perpetual clenching feeling because I knew he only showed up at specific times. So yeah, at the end of the day, RE3 Remake is a solid, polished action game, but it just leaves you wanting way more.
Resident Evil 4.
Then we get to the heavy hitter, Resident Evil 4. Now, unlike the other games, I actually played the original from 2005 and the remake, and to be fair, they are both in my opinion as impressive as each other. Starting with the original RE4. Now, you have to understand, this game changed everything. Even playing it years later, you can feel why it's a masterpiece. It's crazy to think that this is a 2005 game. It's the game that basically invented the modern over-the-shoulder camera. Now, yes, it did have tank controls where you can't move and shoot at the same time, but I say that's a positive in a way, because you're constantly pivoting, you're shooting a Ganado in the knee and then running up for that Leon suplex. I thought the pacing of the story was immaculate. I loved how the mission structure always felt a bit varied. For example, at a certain point you're trapped in a rural village with a chainsaw man sprinting at you for God's sake, and then the next minute you're in this creepy castle. The game definitely set the standard for basically every third-person shooter that came after it. I mean, take Dead Space. But then the RE4 remake happened. Now, usually when a game is that perfect, a remake feels unnecessary, right? Well, wrong. Capcom somehow managed to capture lightning in a bottle twice. It was once again just like RE2 remake built on the RE engine. They modernized the controls so you can finally move and shoot, but they balanced it by making the enemies way more aggressive. I think the biggest difference that I noticed, and it's a positive one, was the parry system. Being able to deflect a literal chainsaw with a combat knife is the coolest thing ever. They also fleshed out the story more. I mean, Louise feels like a real partner now, and Ashley went from being a tad bit annoying to a character you actually wanted to protect. Both versions are essential. It's not really a case of which one is better. I'd say it's a case of how are they both this good.
Resident Evil Revelations.
Now, instead of moving on to Resident Evil 5, I decided to play the spin-off canon game, which is known as Resident Evil Revelations, and there are 2 Revelations games. Now look, I'm a massive fan of the series at this point, but I have to admit that this one was just okay. If I'm being generous, it's a solid 7 out of 10. It's a decent game that bridges the gap between the action-heavy RE5, which I'll talk about next, and the old horror style, but it never quite reaches the heights that I've come to expect from this franchise. A big part of that is its DNA. This game started as a Nintendo 3DS game, I think, and even on my high-end PC, you can kind of tell. It's got this weird episodic structure, like a TV show, which is cool for a handheld, but I think when they ported it to PC, they should have structured it way better for modern hardware, because it gets so annoying hearing previously on Resident Evil Revelations for the 20th goddamn time, and the slow ass door opening disguised as loading screens too. That said, the setting is fantastic. I mean, most of the game takes place on the Queen Zenobia, an abandoned cruise liner. I thought the rusted out, narrow corridors definitely brought back some of that RE1 claustrophobia that I felt was missing in the games I had played. The gameplay is this strange hybrid. You've got the more modern camera, but the pacing is way slower. I actually like that the combat did feel optional, because sometimes it's smarter to just bolt for the objective instead of wasting ammo on a bullet sponge enemy, and there was a lot of them. Now, when you do have to fight, it can be a bit tedious. The dodge mechanic is nowhere near as polished as the previous games I talked about. I mean, half the time I dodged, it didn't even work. And don't even get me started on the boss fights. Some of them, like the Skag Dead, felt a bit cheap with the one-hit kills in cramped areas. The final boss though was super cool in both design and fight, so that's a highlight. Still, I'd say it's a must play for the lore. You get more Jill and Chris, and it introduces Parker, who's actually a very good addition. I didn't really like Jessica, she just felt so unnecessary, and I'll just say it, she was there purely for Gooner bait, because I mean look at her outfit, it's so random and it doesn't make sense. But hey, if it works for that side of the audience, then it works, right? I did like how the story added some depth to the BSAA and the fallout after Raccoon City. This is not a top 5 game for me, but it is definitely a worthy side story.
Resident Evil 5.
Now, at this point in my Resident Evil journey, we're past remakes in recent games. It's time for Resident Evil 5, and oh boy, this game is it's a journey. For me, this game is not bad at all. In fact, it's a solid 7.5 out of 10, and it's an okay Resident Evil game. But I think it's a fantastic action co-op game, and that's where, in my opinion, this game succeeds. This is the point where the franchise goes into full-blown action. But it's not my cup of tea. I play this franchise for survival horror, keyword horror. So if you're looking for a spooky, atmospheric aesthetic of an RE2 or an RE4 or even an RE1, I don't think you'll find it here at all. This is the least scary game in the franchise. I mean, it's mostly bright sunlight. There's, a ton of explosions happening all over the place. And, look at Chris Redfield. He decided to randomly appear like he's been eating nothing but creatine and bricks. Oh, and speaking of bricks, I finally witnessed a boulder punch. I saw the meme for years and never understood it, but now I do. And oh boy, it's just as stupid as the meme suggests. Now, the core of this game is the co-op design. The entire game is built around having a partner, Shiva, and she's meant to be with you at all times. I played this with a friend and it's a blast. I enjoy the concept of trading items. I enjoyed, covering each other during hordes. Even those team-based puzzles that you had to solve, I thought those felt great. I guess if you did play this solo, it might be less fun. However, I've heard the horror stories about the Shiva AI if you do play solo, and apparently she loves to stand in the line of your fire, I think. Now, in terms of the story, it's a long one, but it's high quality. I'd say Wesker is at his absolute peak here, and seeing his and Chris's rivalry reach its climax in a literal volcano is something special. It definitely does show its age, especially with the lingering tank controls in a fast-paced setting, and to be honest, it's probably the entry that needs a remake the most in my opinion. It's divisive because it ditches the horror entirely, but I guess if you accept this game as a high-action co-op shooter type of game, then maybe it's an absolute blast.
Resident Evil.
After the okay experience I had with Resident Evil Revelations 1, I wasn't prepared for how much I was going to love Resident Evil Revelations 2. You know what, I'll say, this might be a top 5 RE game for me personally, and I mean that. It's so much better than the first one. It's got that perfect feeling of Resident Evil in my opinion. And bringing back Barry Burton, by the way, I thought that was such a massive win. The man is a legend. What really made me like this game was the dual protagonist system. You've got Claire and Moira, and then Barry and Natalia. It's episodic like the first one, which I would often find annoying, but here it works. And I think it's because there's way less chapters. The way they handle the co-op is actually genius. One character handles the guns while the other plays a support role. For example, Moira using her flashlight to blind enemies, or Natalia literally sensing monsters through the walls. It makes the quote-unquote stealth and resource management feels super intentional. The story though, that's what keeps me up at night. The whole Alex, Wesker and Natalia plotline is, in my opinion, one of the most innovative things this franchise has done, and it was super interesting. Now, I ended up getting the bad ending because of a tiny choice in episode 3, which I didn't realize was a story ending decision, and I was devastated. And after looking up the good ending on YouTube, I'm just left sitting here wondering where the hell is Natalia? I mean, Capcom basically introduced this massive, super interesting plot point with the Wesker offspring thing, and then they moved on. She hasn't appeared in a single game since 2015. It feels like such a waste of a phenomenal character. Even with the slightly dated graphics and some repetitive environments, I do like this game a lot, and the atmosphere is especially superb. If you've been sleeping on this game because it's a quote-unquote side game, then wake the fuck up. This game is essential in my opinion.
Resident Evil 6.
I have a confession. So, as of me making this video, I haven't even finished Resident Evil 6. In fact, I dropped it when I first played it last year because I just didn't like the direction this game was going in after a few hours. But I need to finish it for storyline reasons, and so as of me making this video, I am playing it right now. I'm only a couple of hours in, but for now I'm not able to speak about it, so let's just move on.
Biohazard 7.
Now this is where the franchise was saved. Because think about it, I remember years ago seeing how poorly Capcom were doing during the whole Resident Evil phase, or rather Resident Evil 6 phase, and they needed a win desperately, and that's exactly what RE7 was. This is the game that saved the franchise, quite literally. I absolutely love it. It's a total 180, changing to a first person perspective by the way, and it completely stripped everything back to a claustrophobic, slow burn horror experience. It felt like Capcom finally remembered that fear is supposed to be the root of the franchise. The story idea of this game is brilliantly simple. I mean, you play as Ethan Winters, a regular man, who I'll be completely honest is not that interesting at all as a protagonist, but his story was. He's essentially looking for his missing wife in a derelict plantation in Louisiana. So yeah, different tone from the past games as there is no, bioterrorism plot or anything of that sort. It's simply you in first person and a super strange Baker family, which by the way, the Bakers are easily some of the best villains in the horror genre. Being stalked by Jack Baker in those rotting hallways gave me that clenched feeling I was talking about earlier all over again. It's also surprisingly classic Resident Evil. I mean, for example, the elaborate puzzles are back, which I loved. The limited inventory management is also back. There's also those safe rooms that we all love. Now, I guess sure, you can say this game isn't perfect because there are quite a few flaws. I mean, for example, the molded enemies lack variety entirely, and I guess the final act goes a bit too heavy on the action. But make no mistake, without this game, we would not have this modern renaissance of the franchise. It's a literal breath of fresh air for a franchise that was grasping for it. It just proved that this series needed to be scary again, and Capcom absolutely delivered. This game has no voice title, so that's pretty awkward. And last but not least on my Resident Evil journey, it's the final game before Resident Evil 9 as of me making this video, and this is RE8. So if the previous game I just talked about was a tribute to the original, then I'd say Village is the spiritual successor to RE4. It brings back that, terrible beauty in that the environments are quite bleak and oppressive. It even brings back the arcade-like flow. I mean, there's a merchant character again called the Duke, who is just as iconic as the original merchant. I would argue this one is even better. I mean, look at the goddamn size of him. Now this game is a total roller coaster. It trades the claustrophobic swamp that we played in RE7 for a snowy village and a massive gothic castle. The graphics are stunning and I mean that's expected. It's the RE engine that Capcom have, which is just fantastic. But overall, I'd say the variety of what this game offers blew me away. It's like a best of horror collection. You have of course the action heavy werewolf fights in the village near the start of the game. You have the classic stalker horror with Lady Dimitrescu in the castle, who, let's be honest, we all wish she had more screen time. And there's House Beneviento, which, oh my god, that made me absolutely shit myself. That big baby thing that goes around the corner, oh my god, I think that was the scariest sequence I've ever played in any horror game. And since RE1, I have played quite a lot of horror. However, it's not perfect. RE8 is definitely more linear than the earlier games, and I did get the sense that this game feels like a series of set pieces, instead of what I love more, which is a massive interconnected area, kind of like the RPD or the mansion. The story is, well, it's not bad. It's stupid in a classic Resident Evil way with plot twists that are absolutely insane, but because I was so invested in Ethan's story from RE7, I didn't give a shit. This was the perfect grand finale to his character. So there you have it, my journey from a horror hater to a full-blown Resident Evil addict. It's been an absolute blast to experience this franchise, and it's officially cemented itself in my top 5 of all time. To be honest, I'm just annoyed I waited this long to play it. But you might have noticed a few gaps in my story. I did say I played almost all of them. I'm still psyching myself up to play the mess that is Resident Evil 6, and I do want to go back and experience the original PS1 trilogy to see what those tank controls and fixed cameras were truly like. I feel like I owe it to the franchise to see the non-remake versions. Now once I finally tick those off the list, I will be back and I will make a ranking video of every single game in the franchise that I play. So yeah, here's to hoping Resident Evil 9 is good, which I can only assume it's going to be. And with all of that said, I will see you all in the next one.